Today, we're gonna take this jacket and we're gonna turn it into this super cute dress. When I'm out thrifting, I find these giant blazers that do not fit me, but I love the patterns in them. They have potential somewhere. And you know what? I love a great blazer dress. So let's start turning these oversized blazers into dresses. Even if you're not turning a blazer into a dress today, you're definitely gonna wanna watch till the end because I'm gonna go over a lot of different tailoring techniques in this tutorial. So come on, let's go turn this blazer into a dress. So today I'm going to be tailoring this up on the dress form, which is roughly my size. But if you don't have a dress form at home, no big deal. Just use yourself and use your mirror at home so that way you can tailor it up to fit you. And a lot of times if you're tailoring it on yourself, you know, maybe you can't tailor it up on the back, but you know you need a few inches taken in the back. So take it off, pin it up, and then try it on. So you're gonna do a lot of taking it on and off and moving and adjusting the pins to get it just right if you don't have a dress form. So I have a basic idea of how I want this dress to look. So I want to raise the neckline on it. Right now, if we button it, I'm going to be showing all the way down to my waistline. Don't want that look for this dress. And it's really big and boxy, so I do want to tailor it up and give it some more shape. And then it is gonna be like micro mini if I leave it this length, so we wanna add some fabric to the bottom. So what I'm gonna do is remove the sleeves, change the style up here in the armhole, and we're gonna use the extra fabric from the sleeves for the bottom. Maybe we'll gather it, maybe we'll pleat it. I'm not sure yet. That's the fun part about upcycling. It kind of takes shape as you create it. So the first thing I want to do is overlap the front so that way I can get rid of this really deep V. You could also inset another piece of fabric back there, but I like the idea of just overlapping this a little bit. And I'm going to pin this down. And with this dress, what I want to do is end up permanently sewing this down and adding a zipper on the side seam to get in and out of it because I don't want to have to worry about all these buttons and it bubbling and like wrinkling and stuff like a button-up shirt. We all know button-up shirts can go all wrong and pop open, right? Well, I don't want my dress to pop open, so we're gonna permanently sew down the front. So right now, I'm gonna pin it shut. So I'm just going to pin the jacket down to the dress form so I know it's not gonna move on me, and then I'm going to overlap the other one. I like the V up here about mid-chest, so I am going to pin this down to the jacket now. And I'm gonna come in and out, so it's actually loose hanging, so I'm actually pinning these two layers of the jacket together. And this will be where I will sew it together later on. Also going to put a few pins in here so that way the layers don't move on me. You know what? I can feel the button in there. We can actually get rid of this button. So let's grab that button out of there. Okay, so now we have this jacket together in the middle. We know exactly where we're going to be sewing this. But now we have got to tailor this up because it's not looking so great, not flattering for me. So now I know I do not want the sleeves on this, so I'm going to remove the sleeves completely so that way I can really get in here, remove the shoulder pads, and do some more tailoring. So I'm just going to pull the seam apart a little, get my seam ripper in there, and see if I can start pulling and popping the seam here. Give a little push, try not to rip any holes in your jacket. If you need to, you can always open up a seam in the lining and work from the inside out. But usually you can separate it enough to get it started here. There we go. So we got a hole in here. If you've got a nice strong fabric too, you can usually kind of pull it a little or just take the back of your seam ripper and work along that seam. We're just gonna work our way all the way around the armhole until the sleeve comes off. We also have a sleeve lining in here that we're going to remove as well. Look at those shoulder pads. Oh my gosh, it's like a couch in here. Okay, now that we have the plaid sleeve off, let's remove the lining. Again, just find one of the seams. Oh, it's chain stitched on. We all know what that means. If we find the right spot, we can just pull it right off. Popping that chain stitch. Oh yeah, look at that. Ooh, nice. Now we got that out. Now you might notice things are stuck together with little tabs of lining. Go ahead and just snip those apart or get in there and remove the tacks that are in there. So those little pieces like this are there to hold the lining to the self. Go ahead and remove those. Now that we have the sleeve off, self and lining, let's remove that shoulder pad. So get in here and, oh, I'd say find out where it was tacked, but you know what? That just popped out. So it looks like it was just stitched into the armhole. So we're gonna remove that. Now that we have one sleeve and shoulder pad off, it's already starting to look like a dress. So now let's do the same thing to the other side. Now that we have both sleeves off, it's time to start pinning and pleating and darting and creating some shape with this jacket. Before we start changing shape of this blazer, I want you to pin your center front together as high as you want your neckline. So I pin this together so that way when I start pulling it to shape it and pleat it, I'm not accidentally gonna open up this neckline and pull it apart. The first thing I'm going to work on is the shoulder. Because we have that giant shoulder pad in there, we're gonna pin it together as if we were sewing. We're basically gonna pin a sewing line in it so that way we know exactly how it would fit if we sewed it. So now I have some pins in there, so that way it's taking up that extra in the shoulder, and it's about 1 inch over here at the edge. And when you're tailoring something, you wanna make sure you keep it balanced if you're looking for a balanced look. So we don't wanna like pull it too far to the back. We're gonna get lots of weird like pole lines in it or up to the front. So I always like to pin it here at the side seam. And if you are doing this on yourself, you can always wear like a tight bodysuit underneath that you can pin it to. So we are just going to pin down our side seam here so that way things stay fairly balanced. And now you can really see how much extra I have here in the back versus the front. Now I know exactly what I'm working with and I can decide if I want to pleat it, dart it, whatever it is I want to do to it. We're also going to pin it at center back so that way I make sure I'm not pulling the right of my garment over to the left, etc. And again, if this is on you, go ahead and mark the shirt or the bodysuit that you have on and pin it to the center of the jacket and then retry it on. So if you don't have a dress form, this is a lot of trying on and off with yourself in the mirror and measuring. Okay, but now that we have center back pinned, we've got our side seam pinned, we have the front overlapped so we don't pull it. We can even throw a pin here at center front so we don't pull center front. Now I know exactly the extra that I'm working with in the front and in the back. Now we can create some shape. I'm gonna start by working with this extra volume here in the front of the jacket. Now we could pin a dart in here. If you're gonna pin a dart, pin your sewing line of a dart. You essentially would be making a fish eye dart, and this would give you a very fitted front bodice all the way up to the bust and then down to the hip or the pocket here. Now sometimes you're limited on shape and design with the garment or the blazer that you're working with. So it looks like, you know, it's gonna pop out here kind of funny in the pocket. Do I like that? Not really. Do I wanna go through the pocket? Not really. This is actually a fake pocket though, so I could. So I'm gonna try pleating. Let's see what pleating looks like. So let's undo the lines of where we would have a dart. And now do we want just one pleat to the front? Do we want a pleat to the back? I'm almost thinking 2 little pleats meeting towards each other. Like, let's see if we can get this nice and neat. And I want it to fit at the waist. So I'm going to be taking in the most at the waist. And then I do like the way this pops out at the pocket. Kind of gives it a 1950s Dior new look vibe. And I'm into that. So I'm gonna put those pins in there so that way I can get a feel for what it's gonna look. I like that it comes up and releases in the bust. We could also sew this down a little bit. So that way we're controlling it in here and then it releases and opens up for the bust and then opens and releases for the hips. So I think that could be cool. Let's get a little more fit in here. There we go. I'm digging that. That's fun. So I think I like this for the front. So now I'm gonna move on to the back. So now we're gonna work with the extra in the back and we have a good amount of it. Because I ended up doing the pleats in the front, I think I'm gonna do pleats in the back, but now I gotta figure out, do I do a bunch of little pleats to the side? Do I do them to the back? I'm kind of thinking maybe I do 1 pleat in the back and then a couple small ones. So let's take some fabric from both sides. The plaid here helps us, so I can evenly distribute the extra just by following the plaid lines. So I'm going to pull a little bit into center back here. And now let's see what we can do with this extra. Kind of liking those pleats towards the back. And now if I remove the pin at the side, we've got quite a bit in here. So I'm thinking I am going to be taking it in the underarm. So I would just pin this like a seam, so that way we know how much to take in. We're gonna take it in right to the waist. So we'd essentially be sewing like a dart in here to take it in. We still have some volume in the hips by adding these pleats, which I love. We still have some movement in the back because of the pleats. We are taking it in completely in the side seam, but then we're pleating in the front to add some volume, but still create shape. So now that I have one side looking good, I always like to pin up the other side just so I can get a full picture of it. And you know, maybe I get another idea while I'm pinning up the other side and I want to switch it up. So what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and pin up the other side just like I did this side so I can get a good feel for it. Now we have it all pinned up and it is taking shape. Take a look at this. We've got our pleats in the front. We've got it overlapped. We have the sides taken in. In the back, I am just loving the pleating here. And I think I might do a pressed box pleat all the way down center back. It is looking great. I am very excited about this. Before we take this off the dress form and move any further, I want to chalk out the armhole because if we can see here, the armhole is really getting covered by the fabric. So I'm going to start chalking this out along the armhole so that way when I do try it on, I can cut a little bit of this off so I know I'm getting a nice true fit. So if you are not using a dress form, just like the inside crease of your arm, go ahead and follow that with the chalk. So if you were using a dress form to tailor your garment and you have pins going in the dress form, you might be wondering, how do I take it off and not lose the placement of my pins? Well, you could chalk it, but you can also leave the pins in so that way you can try it on and see what it's like. So what you're going to do is go up to the pins and you're gonna make sure that the pins are going in and back out of the fabric. Let me show you. So now all of these pins holding this down are in the dress form. So I need to remove them and I need to pin them so that they're going in the fabric and back out, but still keeping my position. So in through all of the layers, be a little tricky, and then back out. And you're gonna work your way up through all of the spots so that way it loosens, comes away from the dress form, but it's still holding the shape that you created. So do this wherever you have this happening on your project. And now you can see my pleat is gonna pull away from the garment. It's loose, it's moving up and down, which means I can try it on like this. And if you want, you can add some additional pins wherever you need to hold this together. So that way when you try it on, it's going to look just like you had it when it was pinned to the dress form. So if I was gonna have a sewing line here holding this pleat down, I definitely wanna put some pins there so it stays together when I try it on. So I've pinned up all of my little pleats and my marks and I'm trying it on here and I wanna make sure that I'm overlapping it right to the chalk mark that I had on the dress form here. And I'm just gonna hold it roughly, take a look in the mirror, make sure I like how it's looking. And if I want to adjust anything, I can. And you might notice some things when you try it on that you really need to adjust. Like for me here, I'm feeling like I've got a little bit of like this wing thing happening. So I know that I'm gonna want to put a little mini dart in here. And when I removed the sleeve, my armhole was pretty big. So I've got some opening here that I wanna close up. So I'm gonna take a little piece of fabric, probably from the sleeve, and I'm going to fill that in. So that way we don't have, you know, all eyes right into the bust there. That's not a good look, right? So just take a look at your garment and assess it on you. And then these flaps here, remember, this is where I'm taking it in. And then let's take a look at the back. Take a look at the back of your garment and, you know, what do you think? Is it laying smooth? Do you have anything you need to take in more or anything you need to let out? Is it pulling? Is it too tight? And a lot of those wrinkles that you see in the back are from pinning because we don't have a stitch line there. So after we get some stitch lines in there, it's really gonna clean it up. The most important thing that you're really looking for is making sure it's not pulling funny or feeling constraining on you. I'm gonna put this on the dress form and pin a few more spots to tailor it up. The main thing I noticed when I tried it on is that I need to make some changes to this armhole. So I had this extra flap of fabric in here. So I'm going to pin this up, and this is going to become a little mini dart. And this is just gonna tailor up the bust area and make it look so much nicer. There we go. So that just blends right to the bust. And now you notice that I'm missing all of this fabric here, but I've got lots of extra fabric in the back here from this jacket being too big. So we're going to cut off the piece of fabric from the back armhole that's too big, and we're basically going to sew it to the front here, so that way we can reshape the armhole to fit real nice. So I'm going to chalk out this armhole so I know exactly where I need to cut off this fabric, and then I'll be able to sew on some fabric, and then we can true up that armhole. So basically I have everything set and I'm ready to start sewing. So let's head over to the table and mark some things before we start sewing. In terms of marking all of this up, we need to mark where we're going to take it in on the inside. So for me, that's going to be my shoulder, that's going to be my bust dart, and it's going to be my side seam. Now right here on the front where I have this pleat happening, we are not marking that. We're going to leave the pins in it because we are going to end up with sewing lines on the outside of the garment. So I'm going to show you how to mark for sewing a seam on the inside, even though we've pinned it on the outside. So we're going to flip it to the inside, make sure your lining is not caught. And now what I want you to do is pull apart the seam and find where that pin is, and we're going to chalk. And it's gonna chalk on both sides of the fabric. And you're gonna work your way down the seam for however many pins you have. Make sure you're chalking on the right and the left of that pin. And now that I have my pins chalked on the inside, I'm gonna flip it to the right and I'm going to remove the pins. So now when I remove the pins, and I flip it back to the inside, you're going to see the chalk marks here on the inside. Now we need to take our ruler and we're going to true this line to make it nice and smooth into the existing seam, and then that's going to be our sewing line. So I'm going to make sure my ruler is in the existing seam. I'm going to mark up the ruler with some of those chalk lines, and we're going to true that line. And now I have my new sewing line that's going to blend into the existing seam. Now go ahead and mark all the spots where you're taking in the seams. Chalk on the inside layer of your project. And if you have a lining layer, you need to chalk the exact same amount to your lining layer and also take in the lining layer. So now I have the shoulders and the bust darts marked up, and it's time to go sew. First, I'm going to take in my shoulders. I'm going to start at the edge of the armhole. Always make sure you're back stitching to secure your seams. Make sure everything is nice and flat, and follow your chalk line that you drew. Always a great idea to engage your needle down button so your stitches don't come unaligned when you're readjusting, and just gradually blend into the existing seam. It needs to very gradually happen, otherwise you're gonna end up with a bump on the outside of your project. Back stitch and cut. And while you're sewing these seams together, double check and make sure that this stitching line is matching your chalk line on the other side, so that way you know you're taking it in enough or not too much. Now I'm going to do the same thing to all of the other spots that I've marked to take in. So now wherever you have a new seam that you've put in, you're gonna go back to that old seam and you're gonna seam rip it open, and we're gonna iron it flat open. So that way when we try it on, we can get a real accurate fit for it. And then if you like the fit and you've got a bunch of extra fabric in here, you can go back and remove it and cut some off. But if it's not super bulky and you don't have a ton of it, you can just leave it in there. But just make sure you undo it and iron it open nice and flat. Otherwise, you're gonna be like bulky in there and it's not gonna lay flat on you and it's gonna look kind of funny. So just open up that seam that was already there. So now I've got it open, and now what I wanna do is go over to the iron, and I'm going to iron this flat open. We always wanna iron our seams flat open whenever possible. You could just chop it off, but what if you sewed it wrong and you took it in too much and you chopped it off and then you ruined your project? We don't want that to happen. So seam rip it, iron it, try it on again, and make sure it looks perfect before you chop off anything. So you're gonna go ahead and do that to any of the seams that you have. So I just did shoulder seams, but now the bust darts, those are different. There is nothing to seam rip open because there was not an existing seam there. So we just wanna make sure that we press them, and you're gonna press your side bust darts down. Now that we have our shoulder seams and darts seam ripped and pressed open, we are ready to move on to the rest of the armhole. So you can see the chalk marks for my new armhole that I want. So I'm gonna go ahead and I am going to cut here all the way around the armhole. So now I have that chunk cut off, but we can see I'm missing a chunk here down in the bottom of the armhole. So I'm going to use a piece of the fabric that I cut off, and we're going to sew that back in down here before I take in the side seam. And if you are putting in an invisible zipper in your side seam like I am, you're actually gonna need to seam rip open your side seam a little bit. So that way you're going to sew a chunk of fabric on from the edge of your seam allowance and up on both sides, so that way this remains a seam with the piece of fabric that you're sewing on. Just real quick, if you snip through any seams, make sure you go back and backstitch them so they don't fall apart. So now we have that extra fabric here, and you can see that it's bringing up the armhole just like we needed it to. So now we need to pin this together so we can see how much we need to take this in. And now I know exactly where my new sewing line needs to be. Now we're gonna do the exact same thing to the other side, but we don't need to open up the side seam because we're not adding a zipper there. Okay, so both armholes are looking great. We've got our extra fabric there extending the armhole. Remember, if you're not putting a zipper in, you can just sew that piece in. You don't have to have a seam here. Now it's time to sew down the pleats in the jacket, and this is really gonna create some progress for our look. I'm gonna show you how to sew down the pleats on one of mine, and then you're gonna go ahead and do that to any that you added to your jacket. Maybe you didn't add any. Maybe you added a ton of them like I did. So I have everything pinned right where I want it, and it is going through to the back. So we're gonna stitch through the lining on this. So we're gonna create a nice little edge stitch from one pin all the way up to the other pin on both sides of this pleat here, and then it's going to hold it securely in place just like the pins are. So I'm gonna stitch right next to the edge, right on the pleat there on both sides. Make sure you take out your pins before you get to them. One side done, now I'm gonna do the other side. Looking great. Just like that, we have it sewn down and it's beautiful. Now I'm going to do the same thing to all the other pleats. I'm done sewing down all of the pleats and it is looking beautiful. I love the way it creates the fullness below the waist. We are looking great in the front too. I'm so excited to finish this. Now we're gonna add the invisible zipper to the left side seam, so that way we can get in and out of it because we're going to end up sewing up the front that overlaps. So we still need to take in this side seam and we need to add the zipper. So what we're going to do is chalk the inside of the garment where the pins are, and that's going to be our sewing line for when we're adding the zipper. So what we need to do is chalk where the pins are, so that way I can remove them and I know exactly how much I need to take in and where my new sewing line will be. So I'm going to chalk both sides just so I have clear understanding of where those pins were before I remove them. Now I can remove these pins. So this chalk line is going to be the sewing line for our new zipper. So when I end up sewing it, I'm going to be sewing it over here because I'm taking it in. But because I have an 18-inch long zipper, I need to open up the seam a little further. So we have our new sewing line here. I'm going to true it up with my ruler. and just blend it back into the existing sewing line. If you want, you can draw your seam allowance and then chop off the rest. You don't have to keep all that extra inside there, or you could wait till after. I'm gonna wait till after. Now I'm gonna add that invisible zipper to the side seam and sew the lining around it. And if you need help inserting an invisible zipper with a lining, make sure you check out my video on that. There will be a link down below in the description. The zipper's in, let's check it out. We have our invisible zipper in the side seam of our jacket here. So we are gonna be able to get in and out of our jacket. Super easy. You're gonna notice I didn't attach the lining yet to the zipper, and that's because I didn't have enough room with these pleats that I sewed down to flip it inside out to sew it. So I'm going to be hand stitching that down. Later on, I'll be adding a little slip stitch, sewing the lining next to the zipper. Now that the zipper's in, it's time to overlap the fronts, pin them together nice and securely, and then we're going to remove it from the dress form and sew it down permanently along center front, and then I'll probably sew it along the other overlap side on the inside. So we're gonna use matching thread, so all we see is a stitching line here, or maybe I'll do a hand stitch so we don't see it. I'm gonna wait and decide on that one. And I'm pinning it on the dress form exactly where I want it. And because I have that side seam zipper in it, I should be able to get it off the dress form with no problem. And if I can't, that means I'm never gonna get in it. So I've pinned it and overlapped right where I would like it. And now we are going to unzip it and make sure we can get it off the dress form. And if you are using a dress form, there's a good chance the shoulders are collapsible and you can push them in if you need to. But woo, just like that, our dress has popped off. So we're gonna do a little edge stitch from the bottom of the roll line here on the jacket all the way down. I'm gonna stop right there. And then I'm actually going to lift up the lapel, and I wanna do a line of stitching here too, because I don't want this to open up real low. I wanna make sure that, we're covering up the top of us as well. I'm gonna start at the hem and work my way to the top of the dress. Now we have the front sewn down, let's take a look at it. The little edge stitch we just put along center front is looking beautiful. And again, we stitched it under the lapel here, holding it down so it's not going to open up. Now it's time to lengthen the dress. That's right. We are going to use the extra fabric from the sleeves to add a little ruffle or gather along the hem, so that way we can add some extra inches, because right now it's a micro mini. There's no sitting, there's no bending in this dress unless you're wearing some little booty shorts under it, and I want to lengthen it so I can wear it. To get the most fabric out of the sleeves, what I'm going to do is fold it in half, and I'm going to measure the sleeve opening down here. And my sleeve opening, when I measure it, is 6 inches. So we have 6 inches here. So that means I can cut it up the center of the sleeve, and then I can straighten out this side, and I'm gonna get 2 strips that are really long and they're about 6 inches wide. And I'm gonna do that to both sleeves. So I'm going to splice up the center of the sleeve. Now it's cut in 2, but we wanna make them the same size. So I'm gonna fold the bottom up here to the top, and then I'm going to cut these so that way they're nice rectangles. So we're gonna chop that chunk off. We will chop this chunk, which is the top of the sleeve, off. And now we are left with 2 rectangles that we can use to gather together. And now we are going to get 2 more as well, because we've got 1 more sleeve. So we're gonna have a lot of great fabric that we can gather up to the bottom of this blazer. Now that I have my sleeves cut into rectangles, it's time to sew them all together. Serge up all the edges, make sure they're nice and clean, and then we're gonna end up with 1 really long rectangle. And then we're gonna gather up that rectangle with the basting stitch, and we're carefully going to place the gathered up rectangle under the hem of the blazer. And then we're going to top stitch it down, and then we're gonna end up with a fabulous gathered ruffle on the bottom of our blazer to lengthen it. This ruffle turned out amazing, just how I wanted it to. Let's take a look. Look at all the fabric I got out of 2 sleeves to create this gorgeous gathered hem on here. I even added a single folded hem to it to finish it off. We are almost done with this dress. All we need to do is finish off the sleeves or the armholes, figure out what we want to do there. Now you could just do some bias facing there and leave it sleeveless, but I think this dress would be so cute with a little black puff sleeve. And since we're upcycling, I figure why not use this black lining fabric and turn it into a puff sleeve. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Before I put the sleeve in, I'm going to finish off the raw edge and the armhole with the serger. So I cut each sleeve into 2 long rectangles. And now to create that sleeve, we're going to place them on top of each other, right sides together. I'm going to serge up the sides, and then I'm going to be left basically with a circle of black fabric. I'm going to finish all my edges with the serger, and then we're going to gather up one side, and then we're going to sew it into the armhole of the dress. So I have my sleeve gathered into the dress, but now I want to puff and gather the bottom of the sleeve. So what I'm going to do is stretch and sew a piece of picot elastic around the edge, and then it's going to puff the bottom, giving us a cute little puff sleeve. Sleeve puffed. Check it out, that little puff sleeve is finished. We've got our cute picot elastic on the edge, and we are all puffed up. And that means we are finished with the dress. Check out this transformation. We went from that giant blazer to this super adorable tailored dress. We really added a lot of details to this dress. We added side bust darts. We added pleats to the front to create shape in the waist. We sewed down our center front. We added this fabulous gathered ruffle at the bottom. We have these awesome sleeves made out of the lining fabric to the sleeve. We've got our invisible zipper at the side. And then on the back, we have our beautiful tailoring with the pleats sewed down and then released. So we have a nice fitted back bodice of the dress. Now is the super exciting part. I get to try on the upcycle and see how it turned out. Here it is, and it fits so good. I am loving this blazer dress I made. What a transformation from that before blazer. Yeah, I could have wore it, but this, so much better, so much cooler. Now it is so Anastasia. I just love all these details in it, and I love how tailored it is. I am so happy with how this dress turned out. I love all the details. I love the tailoring in it and the fit. I am definitely going to be looking for more oversized blazers next time I'm thrifting. I just love upcycling clothing. It is so rewarding to take something and turn it into something else. Upcycling involves a lot of sewing skills, right? We made darts, we did gathering, we put in an invisible zipper, we sewed some lining pieces, we made sleeves, we attached elastic. So many sewing skills are involved. And if you need help with any of your sewing skills, make sure you check out the SewingAnastasiaSewingAcademy.com. I have a Sewing 101 course that is perfect for you to gain all of those skills, so that way upcycling can be super easy and fun for you. And make sure you check out my Pattern of the Month Club, where I offer a new pattern every single month with plenty of tutorials for altering the pattern and sewing it up. It is so much fun. Plus, there's a virtual sewing circle. I now do a virtual sewing circle. So make sure you join Pattern of the Month to check out that virtual sewing circle. Thanks so much for watching Sewing Anastasia today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, leave it down below in the comments. I'd love to know what you thought of this upcycle, and let me know if you'd like to see more upcycles. And if you have some ideas for upcycles, we'll leave those down below too. And if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you know when the new videos come out. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching today. These videos are for you guys. And don't forget to follow me on all the social, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all that, so that way we can stay connected and creative together. And don't forget, if you're in Chicago, well, come on into the design studio and take a sewing class with me in person. So cool, right? Check those out at SewingAnastasia.com. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.